I'd like to introduce you to our speaker. Fraser, I guess we need to stand together. I told them we would do that. And we can give Vern a thumbs up.
Lipstick I just put on for the camera?
Okay. First off, on the roll that we'll be passing around, now this doesn't have to be recorded, Vern, but the roll that will come around, put your name on there and put on there if you are in marketing, accounting, finance, or management. If you're not sure, let us know that too. But we want to make sure that if you're planning to get credit for it, that we give you full credit for being here. And so the roll will come around. Okay. This is Fraser Nelson, and we're very excited to have her come with us today. She has been working in nonprofit organizations, both large and small, for 25 years. And she's been in such areas that are diverse as Appalachia at one end and New York City at the other end. That's quite a diverse role. She led Utah's Disability Law Center for 10 years. And if you're familiar with the Disability Law Center, they have a very strong presence in our state legislature. And they found the program And Justice for All. It's a collaboration for people who are in need of special legal services. In 2008, she and venture capitalist Greg Warnick founded the Community Foundation of Utah. It's dedicated to engaging the giving minds of Utahns. Utah was the only state in the United States that did not have a community foundation. In the last 3 years, they've grown to nearly $3 million in assets and have quite a reputation for their innovation. Fraser has a degree in medieval history and political science from Duke University, an MA in human development from St. Mary's University, and was a social innovation fellow at Stanford University Graduate School of Business. She and her husband, Harris, have a 13-year-old daughter, Nia.
Nia.
And they spend, as she says, an inordinate amount of time at Alta. Fraser?
And I should be there right now. Well, thanks. My friend Mary Miglarelli, Mary, everybody know Mary? She is recent to your campus. She used to run the Fieldstone Foundation. And over the years, Mary and I would get together and talk about things that were going on in Utah in two different ways. Things that were going on in the nonprofit community and our concerns about what was happening to the lives of people in Utah and to the organizations that were serving individuals. And we talked about what we called the social capital markets. And given that you're all in sort of a business mode, I thought I would kind of start our talk by giving you a little bit of an outline of what it is that Mary and I tried to achieve when we created the Community Foundation of Utah. But my real focus in being here is to learn from you, because you are exactly the kinds of people that we need involved in creating social change in Utah. And we want you to do it by, as your professor stated, engaging your giving mind. Now, I know you all don't have a lot of money, probably. I know I don't have a lot of money. But you are at the peak of your networks and your smartness. I am at the tail end of my network and my smartness. I get less intelligent every morning, and my 13-year-old reminds me of that constantly. So when we think about really changing Utah for the better, it's people like you who are really heading out or are in the workforce now, creating a lot of intellectual capital that nonprofits are desperate for, okay? So someone asked me, what's the topic of your lecture, such as it will be a lecture, and it's your next job, because changing society is your job. And pretty soon, it's not going to be my job. I'm 51. I probably got another 10 years of this or so before I just want to do, read and pay college tuition bills. So maybe I actually probably will be working. But it's really going to be your job, okay? So let's talk just a little bit about the social capital markets. If you were a millionaire, had a lot of money, ran a foundation, where would you go for information about where to give your money away or how to give it away? Where would you go in Utah? What do you think? No. Don't even know, right. If you had $1 million and you wanted to invest it in the financial markets, where would you go? Go to a venture capital company? Okay. Where else could you go? Where else could you go? Financial planners? What if you had $5 and you wanted to invest it? What could you do? You put it in a bank, right? If you have money and you want to invest it in the financial markets, there's incredible efficiencies in those markets, right? There's lots of people who will tell you what to invest in. And if you don't want to pay any of those people, or you think they're all a bunch of rip-off artists and they don't really, financial investors just, charge you a lot of fees, you can do it yourself, right? What are the ways that you could do it yourself? Research? Right, you could read the Wall Street Journal. You could go on E-Trade, right? So there's incredible efficiencies in our financial capital markets. Now, they really blew it. They were so efficient, they just blew it completely. But they're very efficient. There's lots of entry to them. There's not really a barrier to entry except to having some money. Now, what if you have a business and you want to get some money? Where do you go to get money if you're an entrepreneur? How many in this room consider themselves entrepreneurs? Okay, so where are you going to go? Go to a bank? Where else can you go? Where's the first place an entrepreneur goes? Family and friends. Followed shortly by dentists and doctors. Dentists and doctors are very early funders. They're also not very good at investing in money. So they own a lot of shopping malls. They're big into shopping malls, okay? Friends and family, dentists and doctors. What's the next level up after friends and family? Where do you go? You're in your basement. You've just invented the Post-it note. Where do you go? You might want to get a patent. You can go to what's called an angel funder. Those are people who generally group together. So it's a bunch of friends. They happen to be rich, but wealthy friends. Oftentimes they were entrepreneurs. And they know that that early stage capital is really important. So a group of them will get together. They go by the names of things like Olympus Angels, Utah Angels. When they all get together at Thanksgiving Point, it's called the Archangels. It's very good. Gabriel comes down. No. And they pool their money together. And what happens is one of the angels typically will say, hey, my neighbor's kid just invented the Post-it note. Could be a big thing. He helps, and I say he because in Utah, they are men. I presented to an angel group. In the 10 years that angel group had been together, they'd had 2 women, and they'd seen over 2,000 deals. 2 were women. So women, we have to break into this group. But they present a deal, and then the angels come together and they say, yes, we'll all put in $50,000. We'll, each put in 10 and come up with 50. We'll each put in 20, come up with 100, whatever it is. So angel funding, and then from angel funding, the next level is generally venture capital funding, banks, etc. Women, by the way, don't get access to venture capital money either. And do you know why? Yes. Because there aren't very many women venture capitalists. Those deals are all inside. Things don't come in over the transom and somebody decides to put $1 million in a deal. It's inside stuff. And in Utah, there are 2 women working in the venture capital space. 2. Anyway, so it's very efficient. If you're trying to get money, there's a whole range of places you can go to get it, from a family to a dentist to a venture capitalist to a bank, conventional loans, etc. Where do you go to try to get money if you're a nonprofit or if you want to change the world? Government? Where else? People, same as family and friends. And then foundations. Now, Utah is unusual well, every place you live is unusual. I mean, Appalachia's unusual, New York's unusual. Utah's even more so in some respects. Utah has lots and lots and lots of little, tiny, private family foundations. Normally, if you want to start a private family foundation, it helps to have the last name of like Rockefeller would be a good one. Gates would be a good one. In Utah, there's lots of private family foundations that were started up with $100,000. Best practice says you shouldn't start a private family foundation with less than 10 million. Okay? But in Utah, attorneys here, I happen to think it's because we didn't have a community foundation, but attorneys here were just like rife with everybody saying, oh, you can have a foundation. You can start a private foundation. Well, what do you suppose that means for the person who's trying to raise money for a not-for-profit organization? Does that sound very efficient? I mean, you have to run around like a chicken with your head cut off to find these little foundations that are maybe going to give you $500, and you're trying to end homelessness. You know, $500 isn't going to cut it, right? So it is very, very inefficient. It's also inefficient for the people who actually have those foundations, because just like financial advisors, there are lots of people who are making money in being part of that system. You have to pay an attorney. You have to file an annual report with the IRS called a 990, which is like the paper you just don't want to even have to do. It's like this thick. So they pay accountants to do this. I've been looking at some data. We were looking at one foundation. Its entire assets are $160,000, and they spent $12,000 in fees last year. Like, what's that about? You know, that could have helped some people. So our financial capital markets can be quite efficient, and our social capital markets are very inefficient. And the other thing that's inefficient about social capital markets is, what do people get to do with their money when they give it away? What do they get to do? They get a tax deduction, right. But up here in their head, what do they get to do? Think about themselves. They can give it to what they want to give it to. You can't force somebody to give to a cause that they don't care about if it's their own personal money, right? And if all they care about is little fluffy kittens, it doesn't matter if the world is falling apart around them, or if they're in the middle of the world's worst, you know, economic crisis since the Depression, and people are going homeless and people are being foreclosed upon. If that person likes fluffy kittens it is. And there's nothing we can do about it. That's their choice. It should be their choice. But if you're trying to raise money, it makes it really difficult, because you have to run around and find the person who really does care about the thing that you care about. But one of the books actually that Mary turned me on to, this woman is describing it this way. So all you entrepreneurs in the room, think about this. When you get money from a venture capitalist, the strings attached are, go make me more money. That's what they want to see. They might put someone on your board. They might try to, you know, encourage you to do this, that, and the other thing. But it's your company, and your job is to go make them as much money as possible, as quickly as possible, so that they can show a good return for their investors. If you're trying to change the world, and let's say you've decided that the way you're going to do that is to create an electric car, okay? You have to find all of the people who really love kittens, persuade them that what they love is electric cars. Then you have to find the ones that want to pay for the electric car parts, because no one's going to pay for the whole thing like a venture capitalist. No one's going to say, just go ahead and invent Google and get back to me when you're rich, right? So you have to find the person who only is interested in front tires. And then there's going to be someone who says, my foundation only pays for steering wheels. So all we do is steering wheels. And then someone who says, well, I like windshield wipers. I will pay for windshield wipers, and that's it. And no one is going to pay for the electricity. No one is going to pay for the operating capital. It's not sexy to say, I'm changing the world, and I really could use some pens. Okay? Or it would be helpful to have a roof over our head. Or maybe a phone would be nice. Everybody wants their dollar to be the one that saved the world. And then on top of it, they want reports. And they want proof that it was their $10 that saved the life, or changed the world, or switched the whole dynamic. And so it makes people who run nonprofits crazy. It makes them crazy. And it's getting much, much harder. Why do you think it's getting harder? What have you noticed recently? What's going on that would make it harder for nonprofits to raise money? Right, people don't have any money. Mm-hmm. Yes, I will repeat that. So the question is, talk about efficiencies. This gentleman just suggested that if you're an architect and you want to go build housing in another country, can companies come along and provide you the material support? Yes, they can, and they do. And they can get a tax benefit for it, to some extent, for material support. Not for necessarily the brains of building or the brawn of building the house, but the material. You know, you probably noticed I just got my hair cut yesterday. And I asked my hairdresser if he would give a haircut to an auction for an organization I'm working for. And his accountant says that he's not allowed to charge for his time as a contribution, only for the price of the shampoo. I said, charge for your time, for Pete's sake. You're an artist, as you can tell. But so there are a lot of limits to that. But the exciting thing about your question is not what is the tax benefit, but what is the benefit of having a bunch of really smart architects think about what kind of housing would work in this particular environment. That is priceless, like the Visa card. Anybody can go buy some drywall, but give me someone who's willing to really noodle on what kind of housing would work in Indonesia or what kind of housing would work in New Delhi. That's an interesting question. You know, in India right now, have any of you been to India? Country of India? Like, what strikes you most about India when you get there? A lot of people. Well, I'm from New York, so, you know, to me it smells good. But India is like, you know, there's like a lot of people in India, a whole lot of people. There is no getting away from people. In fact, the really fancy hotels, what you pay for is the ability to go like this and to have a little space around you. So in India, one of the big questions is, how do we build housing for people who we might, in the United States, consider low income or look at their lifestyle and they're living underneath a blue tarp on the side of the road, but these people have steady jobs. They're drivers. They're some sort of walla. They might work they have a job, like a literal job that they go to every single day. And there is no housing for them because of the issue you raised. High income housing, beautiful housing, fancy apartments, lots of them being built in New Delhi. Housing for the rest of us, it's not being built. Why? Why do you think? No profit. It's not profitable. It's not as profitable when you have a burgeoning middle class. By middle class meaning like people who work at Goldman Sachs and live in Bangalore and live in an apartment that, you know, is nice, but it's not like when you think of, close your eyes and dream of being in New York City and working for Goldman Sachs. It's nowhere near like what you imagine. It's like a regular apartment with concrete floors. So when you think about, like, if you can make money on that kind of housing and there's lots and lots and lots of those people, why would you worry about creating housing for the walla or the driver? So there are people thinking about that. In fact, some of them are from Utah. Have you ever heard of the group Unitas? They did a bunch of micro-lending. Jeff Woolley, Bob Gay, John Huntsman Sr., so older people with buckets and buckets of money. They thought about this whole micro-lending issue, and they've thought about it in lots of creative ways. They said, we're done with micro-lending. Micro-lending, everybody's doing it now. We understand it. We get the model. We're on to housing. And they're grappling exactly with the issue that you raised. How can we create housing for real people in real environments in places that actually make it cost-effective and make a profit? Micro-lending is the thing, you've probably read about this. It's kind of a trendy thing, but I mean trendy I'm being flip when I say trendy. Who raises the economic standard of a family? Who is most responsible for raising the economic standard of a family? Not necessarily. Who thinks about family? The mom. The mom thinks about the family. The dad often thinks about the family, but he's also thinking about soccer. He's thinking about hanging out with friends. He's thinking about lots of things besides the kids. And in many developing countries, if you want to impact poverty in a family and change the way a family and a system and a village and a society work, you change the lives of women. A great book, if you haven't read it, and I have to confess I have not read it either, but I did see the Oprah show, which almost makes you think you've read it, is called Women Hold Up Half the Sky. And it's the story of women who get microloans to start companies. And these loans are, you know, a couple bucks, 20 bucks at the most. I mean, usually they're like $5 to create a business, and then they pay back the loan. And the default rate with women, which is another reason that they use women and not men, is very, very low. It's like 2% for many of these microenterprise funds. There's actually one in Utah called the Utah Microenterprise Loan Fund. It is targeted to women and underrepresented communities in our economic system here in the United States and in Utah. So it's women and men who are probably from an ethnic minority. And you can get up to $25,000 to start a business, to save for, to use for education, to further your business. And probably the most famous business that's come out of the Utah Microenterprise Loan Fund is Rico's Mexican food. He's their biggest, probably their biggest success story. And you know, he started with a cart, and now he's in Smith's. Okay. So, inefficient social capital markets, efficient financial capital markets. And the question is, how do we bridge these two things? How do we make getting money and giving away money more efficient, more impactful, more effective, more measurable? All of those things like return on investment that all the people in the financial world talk about, there's a movement and a thought that maybe we need to move some of that language and those practices over to the nonprofit world. Because the problems are big and the money has gone away. Utah, one of the things the foundation's been doing is we've been tracking the impact of the recession on nonprofits in Utah. And it's like this. Boom. It plummeted. Faster, harder, and unfortunately at this point our data is showing more permanently than any other state in the nation. Anyone else who has done these studies has already seen an uptake, and they never saw it go so low. Why do you think that in Utah, philanthropic giving, charitable giving to nonprofit organizations plummeted so quickly, both from foundations, corporations, and individuals, all three, the big three? Why do you think that is? What do you think might have happened? What makes us unique and different? Right. Bankruptcy and debt, very high in Utah. Very high in Utah. We're conservative. Yes, but lots of other states that are conservative, I mean, we may be the most conservative. We may be almost insanely conservative. As the legislature starts, we will be reminded of that in some respects. I'm a liberal Democrat, in case you didn't pick that up. So I get to mouth off, since this is a lecture, I get to mouth off a little about the legislature. But we are very conservative, it's true. Well, it is true that people in Utah pay tithing, which is a kind of it's not philanthropy, it's not charity, it's a pledge, an obligation you have between you and your religious organization. But if worse comes to worse and your income's really going down and you feel a very direct tie or an obligation to give that money to a certain entity, whether it's a church or a synagogue, yes, absolutely, tithing takes precedent for some families, as does any other religious obligation. It's not just tithing. I mean, I belong to a synagogue, and I always say to my LDS friends, like, you haven't seen anything. So you've been to the temple financial meeting. Okay. Lower wages. People in Utah earn a lower wage. Mm-hmm. Well, there are plenty of places to give your money. Whether or not they're any good is another question. But there are plenty of places. One of the reasons is that we don't have a Fortune 500 company here, headquartered here. So when the economy really crashed, we're like the stepchildren of all of these other companies. So, the big companies, I mean, Wells Fargo certainly continued giving and the rest. But we're pretty far down the food chain. And we have lots and lots and lots of small companies in Utah. We pride ourselves on being entrepreneurial. We're very entrepreneurial. We have to be because there aren't a lot of companies here. So we create our own businesses. They fail or they succeed. If they really succeed, they leave. Okay? We have a big problem, according to my venture capital friends, of investing in companies who then either get sold by, like we just saw with Omniture, bought by Adobe. Adobe's going to put a nice little, place down at Point of the Mountain, but that's not going to be their headquarters. They're not going to care about Utah the same way Omniture cared about Utah, right? And the other big reason, who's the #1 foundation in Utah? When you think private foundation, who do you think of? Huntsman and Eccles. Eccles was really invested in GE stock. What happened to GE? Tanked. The Eccles Foundation at one point was down 40%. Its value was down 40%. I mean, that's like a lot. And foundations, corporations give like this, just like you do. Corporations say, okay, we had a profit of X this quarter, so we're going to give away this much. The next quarter, we had a loss. We're not going to give anything away. So corporate money shut off like this. Foundations give away on a 3-year rolling average. So when the economy tanked in 2008, early 2009, the Eccles were still giving away money from the good years. Now they're looking at giving away money from the bad years. So it's going to be a couple years before we see a rebound in GE stock. Hopefully we will. And it has rebounded largely. And the Eccles don't worry about the Eccles. If any of you are going home, going to lie in bed at night and worry about the Eccles, they're fine. Foundation has plenty of money. They're going to make it. They're going to pull through and put up another bridge over at the U. But, you'd rather have a bridge here? How about a visitor parking sign would be nice on Redwood Road? But anyway, so all of these private foundations, they're just starting to see the impact. And the other thing is, what do private foundations do in Utah or anywhere else in the country? They make big multi-year pledges for capital things that they can put their name on. So they made promises in 2007 that they made thinking that they had a lot more money that they're now having to pay out when they have less. So what that means for you in the blue shirt, W grant, is that there are probably just as many organizations that need the money, and there's less money to give away. Okay? So what do you think has happened to nonprofits in the last 3 years? They've gotten smaller. The layoffs in nonprofits have been astonishing. Basically, every single nonprofit in the state of Utah has laid off staff. They've cut programs. They have, some of them have closed. Some that have been around for a long time have closed. They have tried to find every efficiency they can. They are really in bad shape. And as you said, families that are overextended, we just completed a survey actually last week. 41% of nonprofits in Utah have less than 3 months of operating capital in the bank. 14% have no money at all in the bank. Okay, so think about that. Here they are, these organizations, they have employees, they have people who need what it is they provide, and they don't know, literally don't know, if they're going to make payroll and pay the rent. They're just like us, right? They're just like a lot of families in Utah. But where do you think those families have been going for help? Nonprofits. So, money, down. Staff, cut on average a third. Demand, up every single year, an average of 70% at the Health and Human Service organizations. So can you imagine doing if you're running a business, you would be thrilled to see a year-over-year increase in your customers of 70%, right? You'd be like, this is great. I'm growing. I can hire some people. I can make a bigger difference. I'm going to make a profit. Nonprofits, it's the exact opposite. When someone walks through the door of a nonprofit, money goes out the door, right? People don't pay for the stuff that happens at a food bank or a shelter. So they're losing money by having more clients. And imagine running a business where you're increasing your market share dramatically every single week, and you're having to lay off the people who provide the thing that you do. So how do you think you would feel if that was your reality every single day? Frustrated? How else? Salt Lake Community College, she's saying, is in exactly the same position. More people saying, you know what, it might help if I know how to run a computer, myself included. Maybe I ought to catch up on some of this stuff. Oh, great, Salt Lake Community College is a resource for me. I'm going to show up. I might need a little financial aid. I don't have a job right now. And do you have a bazillion more teachers to help serve all these people? Not enough teachers to serve the people? Did you anticipate this and go see Lisa and Spence Eccles and say, boy, we really could use a building by about 2010? Didn't do that? So the asking for the building for a long time didn't get built in time. It's really tough, right? It's really tough. And that's happening, of course, in the for-profit sector as well, except losing market share and laying people off. So the question is, what do we do about this? What do we do about this? And actually the question is, what are you going to do about it? Because you're the people who are actually expected to solve this problem. Mary and I have given it our all. We're so old, we say like when we were in the movement, which just makes people go, oh my God. But the people who are going to solve this particular problem of making change, making social change happen in a new way, are people like you. So I want to ask you all, what do you think, if I say the word nonprofit organization, those of you that are young entrepreneurial thinkers, what words come to mind? And be brutally honest. What do you think of? How do you think they're run? It's run by a bunch of losers who couldn't find a job in the for-profit market. So maybe they're not like, they're kind of softy losers. So they went a different avenue. So they're not really business thinkers, right? They didn't go into it saying, I know, I really love business. I love thinking about really hard problems and finding innovative solutions. So I'm going to go work at Make-A-Wish, right? They would go work at Omniture, you were thinking. All right, what else do you think of? So they're rich people who want to make their own organization. They're ego-driven, social butterflies. There are those people, but they actually live in Park City. You know, it's interesting. There are 200 nonprofits in Park City. And truly, like, if you can't figure out what to do, you start a nonprofit. I'm just saying that. But, oh, darn, this is taped. No, sorry. Yes, there are people who start nonprofits. So maybe they're sort of, I'm finding my dream thing. What else? Any other thoughts about them? What are they very good at? Right. They're very good at asking people for money. They're good at spending it. What do you think, sir? Yeah, they're easy to blow off because you think you have to be really rich to engage with them. So the executive directors drive really nice cars. I think that's true to some extent. I bought a new Suzuki this year, but you should have seen the car named Old Bear. Yeah, I mean, so sure. What else? They're good at asking for money. Maybe they waste some of it. They're sort of not very business thinking. They're very disorganized. Yes, they are. And you know why? Because all heck is broken loose. And so to some extent, they've become even less organized because they're living in a completely chaotic environment.
They're well connected. They have lots of friends. They know lots of people.
Right.
Similar backgrounds. So if they're well off, they have friends in the country club or the clubs here.
Right.
And they know somebody.
So they're highly networked people with a certain kind of person. You know, they either know the kinds of people who they help. Pamela Atkinson. How many of you heard of Pamela Atkinson? Saint Pamela, as she's called. She spends a lot of her time with homeless individuals and the rest of her time with, like, the Huntsmans. She's kind of bifurcated in her social realms. Okay. So one of the things we did when we started the Community Foundation is we got a bunch of entrepreneurs in the room. And these were people like Rick Alden, who runs Skull Candy, and Jeremy Andrus, who runs Skull Candy, Josh James from Omniture, you know, these kinds of people. And we said, what do you guys think about nonprofits? And they said the same things you did. Bunch of old ladies who, you know, majored in medieval history, couldn't get a job in the real world, want to hobnob at the country club, and all they do is ask for money. That's all they do. They probably do something eventually with that money, but I don't know what it is. I've heard of Make-A-Wish in the food bank. But I'm really busy inventing headphones with skulls on the side of them, so I can't be bothered to know about poverty. I really like headphones. And I'm really oriented to getting rich. So then we brought together a bunch of nonprofit people, and we said, hey guys, what do you think about these entrepreneurs? So these were people like Mary and I, me. And we said, what a bunch of stuck-up sticky beaks, nerds. All they care about is getting rich. They think there's an app for homelessness. Wait till they find out. We don't, you know, but they're probably going to be rich, so we should probably at least get to know them. So one of the things the Community Foundation's been doing is to try and, as we say, engage your giving mind to get people like you to talk to people like Mary and say, hey, if you had to end homelessness, what would you do? So I want to ask you, if you had to end homelessness, if you had to solve childhood obesity, if you had to find a way to build housing for drivers in India, what skills could you bring to that? What do you have that I don't have? What is it that you're learning here and that you know that people like Mary and I don't know? What are your skill sets? How to be organized, how to think logically. Okay, what else? Well networked. Yep. The networks that you have when you're 30 and 40 are priceless. They are priceless. You know everybody who 10 years from now, I'm going to wish I knew. What else do you have? Let me put it this, Time. Because you don't sleep as much. You don't have as many kids. Maybe you don't have a job that takes, some of the entrepreneurs that we work with, they write me emails at 4 o'clock in the morning, and they're completely coherent. If I was writing an email at 4 o'clock in the morning, it'd be about George Clooney or something. I don't know what I'm thinking about at 4 o'clock in the morning, but it's not business. Okay, what else? What else do you have? Motivation. Motivation. And what kinds of things do you actually want to do? How do you want to spend your time? If I were to say to you, I want you to engage in solving a social problem, help me thinking that through. What is it that you'd actually like to do? What would you find interesting? What do you guys do all day? Communications, networking, Facebook. I got to say, we're not really great at Facebook yet in the nonprofit world. What else? Mm-hmm. You guys are very, very good at thinking outside the box. You're very good at being innovative. You're naturally innovative. You haven't seen it before, so when you look at a social problem, you look at it in a whole new way. One of the things we did is we did a thing called speed mentoring, and we did another event called the Social Innovation Challenge. We gave 6 nonprofits a team of 5 entrepreneurs and 3 months to solve a problem. And they solved problems in the way that the nonprofits never in a million years would have thought of. Never, ever, ever, because they brought entrepreneurial thinking, business thinking, to a problem that had been part of that organization for years. It might be an internal problem, like how do we run our business? Are we using an abacus and QuickBooks? Might there be something besides Excel 2003 out there that we could use? Like Twitter, like what is that? Why is that? All these kinds of things. But here's what we learned about entrepreneurs, and then I'm going to stop and ask you if you have questions for me. What they don't want to do is go to galas. How many of you are dying to go to a gala and bid on a silent auction item for a spa treatment? Like, is that top on your list of things to do tonight? Put on a tuxedo? Do you have a tuxedo that you're just dying to wear in the closet? No, right? So entrepreneurs do not want to go to galas. Yet what else do they not want to do? What is the worst way you can spend your time if you're young and smart and thinking all the time? Meetings, board meetings. We had an entrepreneur, a guy named runs a company called Jive Communications, young guy, Brent Thompson. He said, okay, his brother-in-law was somehow involved with a nonprofit. And Brent said, I run this voice over IP company, telephone company. I will give you, they spend $45,000 a year on long-distance calls. How that happened is because they had never asked Quest if they might get a deal. or think about any of that. They were probably still like renting phones, right? So he said, I'm going to come in and I'm going to give you guys, I'm going to figure out your technology needs, your voice needs, and I'm going to give you guys the system. So of course the board says that'd be great, but we have to have a subcommittee. So they create the technology subcommittee. And the technology subcommittee meets several times, and Brent has to go each time and explain what his business does. And then he goes to the finance committee. So another 3 months goes by. So this is $45,000 a year is ticking. And he's like, okay, I'll give you the phones. I will give you the phones. It's going to save you $45,000 a year. Okay, I'll give you the $5 a month it costs for a line. I'm just going to give it to you so that I can get out of this. At this point, he's like, kill me now. They go to the board, the final board meeting, and there sits the chairman of the board, and he says, I do not believe in voice over IP. I don't believe in it. So we're not going to do this. And Brent's like, I've built a several million-dollar company. I have clients all over the world. And you don't believe in what this is not a fantasy of mine. Have you heard of Skype? I don't believe in it. And he vetoed it. And that was the last Brent was going to be involved in a nonprofit, right? I'm like, I'll take the phones. So that's what we really have to avoid, right, is that kind of experience. We have to make sure that when we think about the efficiencies of the social capital market, we're not just thinking about the financial capital, we're thinking about your intellectual capital. And you are inheriting these problems. These are your problems. These are very much your problems. The world's problems are your problems. So use your smarts to figure them out, and use your smarts well. High impact, intellectually based, skills based volunteering is what I'd like you to do. Okay? Questions, Mary? Mm-hmm. Okay, sure.
Okay, let's give her a round of applause. Will you please?
Thank you.